I've just been thinking about how everything in the West is consumption.
A little different than all the rest.
I think when we think about traditional consumerism, oh, I don't need to be buying this phone, I don't need to be buying this new car, I don't need to be buying this new headphone. But I think consumption and labor are so intertwined. That connection is not made enough by researchers, by scholars, by people that are just existing. And I think it's a trick. It's a trick by the people that are owners of production to make us think that we have some sovereignty, some autonomy while they're doing the exploiting. My friend and I were discussing about how the way that industrialized nations like the United States talks about consumption in every way. You consume content, and this is like art that people made. You consume it. I feel like this region of the world has built a group of consumers rather than people that are just also doing work. Your identity is a consumer. And I think this happened in so many realms. I think we always think about it in these material things. Oh, I don't really consume that. I don't really consume that. I rather have that as an experiential thing. And I've always had a thing about that. When people are I rather purchase
experience
so I can experience something. Obviously that's much better. I think that's harm reduction capitalism, but I do feel like we're still consuming even our leisure. I'm reading this book, Your Money or Your Life, because someone recommended it for me, and it's really good so far. I'm only I want to say 30% in, and one of the things that the author talks about is America has built a country of consumers, not citizens. Yeah, one of the things that she brings up is that leisure is something to be consumed as well. The conversation I was having with my friend was her family is from Venezuela and my family is from East Africa, specifically Eritrea and Ethiopia, and we have a very interesting coming into this country. One of the things that we were talking about is why is there this desire and this push to make other countries be prepped to accept tourists? Tourism seems to be a huge hand of capitalism that we don't often talk about because it's we deserve, I deserve to go to Bali. I deserve it because I work so hard. All the justifications. And I'm not even gonna pretend I'm about to be above it. I love traveling. That's one of my favorite things. But also, does ethical tourism exist? It's something that I just run into often. And so my friend and I were talking, and she was talking about how Venezuela has kind of shifted into a country that is readying up to take in more tourists, more expats. Taking the note from Ecuador, from Guatemala, and from Mexico even. I feel like CDMA is one of those cities that feels like it's readied up enough for tourists that it's an enclave of tourism. It's really interesting. Same thing with Ethiopia, a country that is going through urbanization of very I think historical proportions. As someone who grew up there, and my family has been there for 2 generations, specifically Addis Ababa. These countries that we are saying that we're going to rest and enjoy tourism, it's almost like a break or a relief, or what is the word we were talking about? Reprieve from the real world. When you go to a country like Ethiopia, your money, your dollar can get you a little bit further, not as much in 2025, but it still can get you far enough, and you can momentarily get the treatment of the upper middle class and the rich in a country like Ethiopia comparatively to here where you're just a regular laborer. And that just makes me think about why so many diasporas end up going to Ethiopia or to their home country. They don't choose to do something super meaningful. Not that I'm saying everyone needs to do that, but I'm saying a lot of the time when diasporas go home, they are almost trying to mimic the thing that is going to make them individually powerful, rich, right? This is the discomfort that we have talking about, especially as people that are immigrants into a country that is been stolen, has been exploited in different ways, and we're going to another country that is also exploited but in a different way. We don't hold the radical politic and like the praxis of all of that. We don't take it back home. It almost gets fizzled out because obviously there's way less autonomy and control when you go back. Even though you're like from that place, you're like, once you have left, you're not technically from that place. It's a very contradiction thing that I can talk about for hours, but it does make me think about how the original topic of consumption. Travel is a consumption thing we do. I think when people pay hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars for concerts or to fly across the country to see Taylor Swift and pay for their ticket and their hotel room and stuff like that, it makes me think about how as a culture we are and continue to be trained to be laborers who are getting a reprieve, a time off. The more you work, the more you are going to consume because you're going to need your money to go somewhere that feels valuable to you, and that's usually like convenience, right? You might DoorDash food, you might get alcohol, you might go out with your friends and splurge. I think a lot of the time when we go out, we're paying for things that shouldn't cost that much money, but because we can't look ahead and think to ourselves, not even like a cheaper way to do this, but like, is there an alternative way of doing this without being a consumer? We don't think about that. You go to like nice restaurants and you're dropping $100. That's being a consumer. But I think that's not treated in the same way as like getting like a Sephora haul or something, because in order to socialize and exist with your community and friends and all of those people, you need to spend money, you need to drop money. I think capitalism and the culture of consumption has normalized that to the point that the only thing we see as a metric for fulfillment is consuming and dropping money on the thing. You know, there's a lot of words that we put depending on what job or like what status, what strata we're in the society that we had no like choice in wanting to be a part of, but we are. There's such self-worth, even like, oh, this is what I do, like I actually don't matter as much, or my opinion are not as valuable, because the society and the conditions of the environment, I feel like, forces us to think that we're not as valuable. And like, it's actually like, it's a confirmation bias. The society and the environment tell us, actually, yeah, that's true, you're right, you don't actually matter. I also have been thinking about how the satisfaction rate they talk about, like specifically like in Nordic countries, the satisfaction rate of the citizens is so much higher than it is in the United States or Canada or a lot of other industrialist countries in the West, because of the fact that they have these social nets that we talk about all the time, and people are like, ugh, please stop talking about this. The fact that it's a walkable city and you don't have to spend as much money to go outside, the fact that there's a lot of free things, the fact that children can be at most places without people feeling like it's the wrong thing to do, the fact that grocery shopping is not a luxury choice. The culture of the United States, for the longest time, you know, I'm sure people were not traveling as much until very recently when people started to recognize, I literally go to Bali and all I need is like money and internet's advice. And I think that is also why when we go to another country, a lot of people from the West, specifically America, and I don't like this conversation of like Americans are so this way. I feel like that's a very empty conversation. It doesn't, not contextualizing anything that is mandated by the US government to make Americans feel isolated, and the only choice they have most of the time is to continue to think America is the best country in the world. I don't think people know the chokehold that has on people's identity, worth, and how they show up in the world. And so that's why I actually hate those conversations. I do want to say there is a part of this that I feel very invested in, who definitely came from a poor family and came to the US, and now I am like more middle class, and to me, I don't think this is the life I like if I was to tell you how my life is, I feel like I'm happy most days. But then I think about the overarching themes of my life, and I think the times that when I was spending the most money on things, and I was conscious of how I was consuming everything, and I'm talking about concerts, travel, going out with friends. I think there is like an autopilot that we get into when it comes to consumption in America, because there's such scarcity of time to spend with each other. So might as well just take advantage of it, or I'm gonna lose all my friends, or I'm gonna lose all my community. It's a deep wound that we don't talk about enough. And I think when I think about like intimacy and like the lack of intimacy that I feel is very, very resonant in the air these days, it is that you're not supposed to talk about money. If you're not able to come in with money to even hang out with your friends, like, even though that's not very true, I think there's a part of you that still feels like I should show up with money. I should pay for myself. And it's like, who said that? But the fact that is the conditioning that we have received, I feel like definitely like has like a domino effect of us becoming a consumer and someone who focuses so much on money, because the society that we're brought up in, the focal point is money and nothing else. Like, your life is something that happens outside of that. It's really, really awful.